Okay, good afternoon 3A6. This is the second part in the series of my flipped classroom lessons. Alright, and today we'll be focusing on gradient. Alright, you can read for yourself that at the end of this session, I need you to be able to calculate the gradient of the of a line once you are given 2 points. Alright, so without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so a quick recap. Here you can actually see a line. This line has a gradient of 1. Alright, and how do I tell that using the knowledge that you have learned in Sec 2? What you do is that you actually use the rise over run. Okay, how do you know the rise of this line segment? You can count vertically, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's the rise. And the run is, if I look at, start from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as well. Alright, so the gradient will be the rise over run 6 over 6, which means this line has a gradient of 1. But we don't always have lines this nice. Sometimes the lines may have weird gradients. When I say weird, it means that maybe their gradient is not a whole number, not an integer, but another rational number. Alright, so now let's take for example here. Okay, here is a line. It's actually the gradient of this line is much less than 1. Okay, because it's not as steep, it's flatter, it's not exactly 0. A gradient of 0 will give us a horizontal line, but this line is pretty flat, it's not 0. So how do I go and about calculating the gradient? Okay, so this is what I have to do. I have to go and invoke the gradient formula. Okay, so first time, okay, you're seeing this. I'm going to show it to you. Okay, pardon me, let's change color. Okay, so here's the formula for gradient of a line. Okay, gradient of a line. Wait, I want black. Okay, so the gradient of a line gradient of a line is equals to this formula here. Okay, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, and that's all there is to it. Okay, so now I'm going to write down the numbers that I showed you in GeoGebra. Okay, I mean, when I say numbers, I mean the coordinates. This was the first coordinate, okay, and this was the second coordinate. Alright, but actually the order doesn't matter so long as you are careful about which number you pick first. Okay, so again, this is the formula. Here's my substitution. Okay, so for y1, okay, let's say we designate different color. Okay, we call this the first point. Okay, but once again, order doesn't really matter, just so long as you are consistent with the ordering. Here later on I'll show. I mean, this is the first line, this is the second line. Okay, so this is our y1. Okay, because it's the y coordinate of the first point, so y1 for short. And this one over here is y2. Alright, so let's get to it. Okay, so y1 is 2 minus 3. Okay, and the bottom x1 minus x2. Now listen carefully. Okay, because I designated this is the first point, right? So x1 has to be from here. This is x1 and this is x2. Okay, so once we set the order, you should not mix them up. Okay, again, let's go back. Okay, 2 minus 3, that's y1 minus y2. x1 is 1 minus 11. Okay, so you might notice that, hey, is the gradient negative? Because over here 2 minus 3 is a negative number. No, not really, because when the dust settles, okay, 2 minus 3 is minus 1, and 1 minus 11 is actually minus 10. So actually when the dust settles, the final answer for the gradient is, once you simplify it, is actually 1 over 10, okay, or 0.1. That's the gradient of the line over here. Okay, the gradient of this line. Alright, and it's actually, you can see that it's much less steep than a line with a gradient of a 1. Okay, so it makes sense. Alright, now I'm just going to show you one more thing. Alright, before I end this video. Okay, I've got a slider here that actually can tell you how the lines how the line will look like if you just change the gradient. Okay, so this is the gradient 0.1. Okay, so this line has the same steepness as the one I showed you just now. Okay, not very steep. Of course, a line with a gradient of 0 will be totally horizontal. You can't even see the line here because it's kind of obscured by the x-axis. Okay, and this is how a line of gradient 1 looks like. So actually, a gradient of 1, pretty steep. I imagine you'll have trouble walking up this. Okay, and a gradient of 2 is even worse. Okay, quite steep. You know, I don't think you could walk off a line with gradient 2. Alright, so what does negative gradient mean? Negative gradient, like you learned in Sec 1, means that the line is sloping the other way. Okay, so a line of gradient -1 would be just as steep as a line of gradient of +1, just that it's in the other direction. Alright, so I'm just going to stop the video here, and I'll show you another example next.